The busiest man in college football media and one day our future commissioner. That's Josh Pate, who joins us to break down Alabama football so far this season. Josh, it's really good to see you just where things stand now for Alabama. How much better is it than what we were talking about after week one?
Feels like 2 seasons, really, I would say. It feels like the kind of emotion that you've already experienced pre, during, and post Florida State. And then fast forwarding, okay, UL Monroe, then Wisconsin, and then, the big sort of restart. I would say like the re-grand opening of Alabama's football season for 2025 was the Georgia game. And then I think the general public, okay, they watched the Georgia game and then it's okay, good, Bama's back. Bama fans knew Georgia game, awesome. All right, now it's time to go take care of business against Vanderbilt. That's really what I think a lot of those players had their mind on after that Georgia game. So then you get over that one. What I have been looking at this entire time is Eli Drinkwitz is going to get them at home rested. That's really what the schedule makers did to Alabama. So it's this every single week it feels like, which is life in the SEC. That's what you sign up for. If people don't believe me, go check out South Carolina's schedule. I was looking at that this morning. They play five top 11 teams over the next 5 weeks. So, it could be worse. But I think a lot of the things that you hoped to have from the start, you now have. It just may have taken a bump in the road at the beginning of the season to, who knows? For all we know, it took that bump to shake it all into place, but it is in place now, and Bama looks like one of the best teams in the country.
Certainly do. And are we just now starting to see what a Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer offense should look like? We saw it, of course, when it was humming at Washington, but at Alabama, are we now starting to see what it should look like?
I think you're starting to see what it should look like. I vividly remember that year that they had up at Washington a couple of years ago. I went up there to see them play Oregon, and Oregon, I think Washington won the game 33-30. Unbelievable game. Highly encourage people to go to Husky Stadium if they haven't. But I remember everyone thought Oregon would have the running advantage and they'd have the physical advantage. And they didn't really have a ton of physical advantage. They did have the rushing edge in game one. So then you fast forward all the way down the road, Pac-12 championship games coming up. And I remember Oregon was over a touchdown favorite, which made no sense to people who don't understand betting in the rematch. But what stood out to me is Washington just gashed them on the ground. And I remember thinking, wow, like when they played a couple of months ago, I wouldn't even have called the ground game one of the strengths of Washington's offensive attack. Michael Penix and Roma Dunze and all those receivers, that was it. Well, they kept adding layers as the weeks went on, and they kept, here's a crazy concept, they kept on getting better. They kept on developing, and I've heard them talk many times about layering the offense and just adding another pancake onto the stack week over week over week. Now, when you got young, immature players, that's hard to do. When you've got undisciplined or inconsistent players, that's hard to do, but that's not what they have. They've got a group, veteran enough, but really competitively mature enough, I think, to handle that. Smart guys, they're cerebral, they're very sharp, they're highly athletic. And so, yeah, that's a perfect situation for a Ryan Grubb and a Kalen DeBoer to be in, because then you can continue to reasonably expect we could build that stack higher and higher and higher. So I don't think it's any coincidence that, oh, look at that, man. Jam Miller broke some runs last week. Wow. It just so happens that the run game started to show up. Now, the big question moving forward is that is that a one-off, which I don't expect to be the case, or is it a theme? Because I think you can imagine already seeing how Ty's throwing the ball, seeing how that wide receiver room has emerged big time, what attaching even a B-level ground game, rushing attack, would do to that. And then downstream of Jam Miller, you just start wondering, okay, what do the other tailbacks contribute second half of the season? What does this team look like in November? Yeah, it's fun to watch because you can tell that's not a stagnant product. That offensive product at Alabama continues to trend up week over week.
What's impressing you most right now about Ty Simpson and how he's growing this season?
I said the word cerebral, so I should probably use another adjective, but I don't have many. So cerebral, that's what I would say is he's experiencing a lot for the first time in that he has only been the starter for 1 year. So I always really marvel at these guys who are going around the merry-go-round one time. Some of them only have one go-round because they had to wait to this point in their careers. And it's just something that what is he, like 20, 21? How old is he right now?
21,
somewhere around
22,
there.
around there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 20 years from now, he's gone on to do whatever he does in the NFL. He's retired. You'll look back and you'll realize, just like you and just like I and anyone else could realize how quickly the 21st year of our life went by. That's just normal people. Think about being the starting quarterback at Alabama, and it only happens once. And think about just how quick that happens, and then thinking about how zoned in you have to be in that moment to where the outside noise doesn't really exist, the outside world doesn't really exist, how much quicker it must make it go by when you have to have that mentality. So I just picture his life being a blur, which it is. Here's the skill. The skill, and this is partly on culture there, this is partly on the player, is creating an environment kind of like in that movie For Love of the Game, where Kevin Costner's on the mound there at Yankee Stadium and it's 50,000 people screaming. And then he just says to himself, all right, clear the mechanism. And then all the noise shuts off. And it's just the sound of him and the ball in his glove and spikes on the rubber. And boom, strike one. All right, we're off. We're underway. That's kind of how you have to be as a quarterback at the University of Alabama. That's how you have to be. It sounds so simple. I just said that in like 15 seconds. To be able to train your mind to do that as the player or to create the environment as the head coach and just organizationally to cultivate that being able to happen, to run your media side of things, like what Alex Thompson and those guys have to do, to be able to create that entire ecosystem. Most can't do that. Now, you wouldn't be at Bama if you couldn't do it. There are only a few qualified to do it, and that's why those guys are in the positions they're in. I don't think people will ever appreciate from the outside how hard it is. They watch you for 3.5 hours on a Saturday. They may see some practice clips. If it's you, you're living that life. Ty Simpson lives that life 24/7. So that I know we could talk about, throws he's made. We could talk about reads he's made, lack of turnovers. All of that to me is well downstream of creating the environment that makes it possible. Because at that point, it's just your athletic ability and your decision making that takes place in a game on Saturday.
And then what are you seeing from this Alabama defense? Slowed down the run against Vanderbilt, didn't allow any points in the second half, and stopping the run is going to be critical for Alabama coming up this week at Mizzou.
Yeah, I have a couple of buddies, longtime Alabama fans, who have texted me a couple of games in a row now, Georgia game and Vandy game, which, correct me if I'm wrong, both went Alabama's way. And I've seen texts in the middle of the game. I could go back and embarrass them where they're just blowing up Kane, blowing up the defense. And then you fast forward to the end of the game and Vandy's got 14 points on the board. And I keep telling them, like, you guys watched for the past 15 years up until recently, you watched wave after wave of first round NFL caliber defensive front depth roll through Tuscaloosa. And that's not to say that that can't happen again, but to have it stacked like Nick Saban did, and like a couple of other programs were able to do for a little while, it's not realistic to expect to have that kind of talent profile in terms of depth in the building anymore. The landscape of college football has changed. Got nothing to do with Bama, it's got something to do with college football. So they got good players there. There aren't a lot of future first rounders waiting their turn to even get reps, if that makes any sense. And so what that means is you can't just count on suffocating people every week anymore. You gotta scheme, you gotta adjust, you gotta adapt, you gotta outcoach, but you gotta find margins. You gotta find success on the margins. And you know what? If that means sometimes you bend a little bit to avoid breaking, which are just dirty words for a Bama fan. That's the way that Big 12 teams are supposed to play. That's not the way we're supposed to play. Buddy, everybody's doing it. Georgia's doing it. Ohio State's not doing it yet, but when they come up against better competition, they'll probably have to do it as well. It's what everyone's having to do. You've got basically, I picture the job Kane Womack has, or any defensive coordinator, with the variety of offensive attacks that come at you over a 12-game season, and the fact that you just got what you got defensively. It must be like seeing a dam with 11 holes in it, and I got 10 fingers. So no matter what I do, there's a hole somewhere. I just got to be strategic about how I plug and where I plug and when I plug. So I think they've done a wonderful job, because I remember how it felt watching Bama's game against Vandy last year. It felt like you got no answer. Well, then it starts off the way it starts off last Saturday. And I was at the FSU game. I was walking into the stadium down there, and I remember looking at my phone saying, man, this feels like the fifth quarter of last year's game. This does not bode well for the rest of the afternoon. Well, then they adjusted. And your biggest fear if you're a Bama fan is, uh-oh, we're not going to have the adjustments. Well, you had the adjustments. All right, so that's what I'd focus on a lot more than how'd Vandy start. How'd they finish? How'd the other three quarters go? That's actually a really good sign for them.
So as we enter week 7, big picture, just in your opinion, who is the best team in the SEC?
Hmm. I love what I've seen from Texas A&M so far. I love what I've seen recently from Alabama. Those two, I think Oklahoma as well. So Oklahoma's a third, pending the health status of the quarterback, are the three teams that I'd circle right now. I just think it's funny we just mentioned the Big 12 because I think the nature of the SEC feels a lot like the Big 12 this year. The talent profile, the overall athletic profile of the teams is better than what the Big 12 would normally try it out. But I mean the competitive balance. The fact that we're sitting here, it's October 7th as you and I are recording, and we could make a case for half a dozen teams winning this league right now. And I don't know. I mean, when have we ever said that? Normally you've got a favorite, maybe co-favorites, and then the question people ask all year long is, could anyone potentially challenge them? And that's the way they talk in the Big Ten now, because there's a lot more separation in the Big Ten. Down here, you got like half a dozen, if not more, teams that could go on to win it. And your question becomes, who stays healthy? That's really the main thing. And then if they do, Bama absolutely is right up there. They're the odds-on favorite to win it right now. I like what I've seen from Texas A&M. The reason I had like one corner of my smile there curl up is I know what the reaction is when you mention A&M because they haven't done it. So people listen to that, and until they see someone do something, there's a sizable portion of the college football public, as I call it, that doesn't believe it's possible. There's folks that don't believe it's possible for Texas A&M to win the SEC. Who knows? Maybe they're right. I don't think they're right, but I do understand that mentality. So I'd go A&M and Bama and Oklahoma. The only reason I hesitate with Oklahoma is they haven't left home yet. So they're going to Dallas this week to play Texas. That's the first time they've left home aside from some random trip to Temple. I don't know who scheduled that, but that wasn't a challenging trip. So it's kind of like I went and saw Miami last week. I needed to see them on the road. They handled business on the road. All right, they're legit. I want to see Oklahoma handle business on the road. But those three, I think, slightly stand out amongst the pack right now.
So speaking of staying at home, the Missouri Tigers, they have not left home either as they get ready to welcome in Alabama coming up this week. You're going to be, I believe, going to the game. What's going to be most important in this matchup for Alabama at Mizzou?
You know what? Everyone always says hot start. So I'll say hot start. I just think offensive efficiency continuing to click. And just like last game, the adjustment defensively. It is not realistic to me to just think you're going to go in there and stone Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz and how good that offense has been. And they're coming off a bye. They've got an extremely good tailback there that I know people have heard the name of, Ahmad Hardy, but because Missouri hasn't played a high level game, most people probably haven't seen him play. Folks were talking about him around the league, though, that had to play Missouri as soon as he transferred there. So they were very aware, as was Alabama staff. They were very aware of how good that player is. I think if you ask Penn State fans, given the current state of your season, would you rather have the quarterback you have, or would you rather have Bo Perbula, the guy who transferred to Missouri? I think they'd choose the latter instead of the former. So a drink just puts guys in good position to succeed. You're going to have the roster advantage on them. They're going to have home field advantage against you. I think what you have to, like what I'll be aware of for every Alabama game the rest of the year is I love that there is now a trend of 2 weeks in a row, not very penalized. There's a trend 2 weeks in a row. I know they had the turnover early against Vandy, but this is not a turnover prone team. This is not a penalty ridden team so far. Really, really good efficiency on the road. Last time I saw him go on the road. So I'm just looking to check those boxes every week. Because honestly, if you told me nothing more than Bama's not going to be penalized very much at all Saturday, and they're not really going to turn it over Saturday, Bama's probably going to win the game. You just tell me those two things. All due respect to Missouri. You tell me those two things. I think they can score 40 if they need to. I think they can get stops enough defensively if they need to. It's do you control the controllables? And if they do, I think they'll be okay.
Certainly hope you're right. Well, Josh Pate, catch him, of course, ESPN on 3 Sports, Yahoo Sports, and Josh Pate's college football show on YouTube. Josh, we always enjoy your breakdowns of college football. Just thank you for joining us on the Crimson Tide Sports Network this week and look forward to hopefully seeing you on Saturday. Thank you.
All right, Roger. Appreciate you having me.